I always thought learning a second language would be straightforward until I started learning Norwegian and realized just how overwhelming it actually is. My Norwegian learning journey has been messy, slow, and more complex than I could have ever imagined. There were moments I genuinely questioned whether or not I was capable of learning a second language. And I know that I'm not alone in these feelings. So today I want to share my real, unaesthetic language learning journey, how I went from a complete beginner to an A2 to B1 level in Norwegian. If you're new here, hi, I'm Esme, an American currently learning Norwegian. Quick disclaimer, I am not fluent in Norwegian. I am not a language teacher, and I do not live in Norway. That being said, I am someone who has experienced what it's like to try and teach themselves another language. I know from firsthand experience the confusion and frustration that comes along with learning another language. And I want to talk about these feelings and experiences more openly in the language learning community. I feel like sharing my experience will be a step in that direction. Our story begins in spring of 2021, which was about 1 year after the US shut down due to COVID, and about 6 months after I went through a pretty bad breakup. I don't know, something about this time just really pushed me towards change. I decided to revisit my childhood dream of learning a second language. As I mentioned in my intro video, I had previously tried learning French in school. I chose not to pursue French because something in me needed a fresh start. So I did the only thing I could think to do, and I Googled what were the easiest languages for a native English speaker to learn. I don't remember the exact YouTube video I stumbled upon, but this video listed out the top 10 or 15 easiest languages a native English speaker could learn. The video mentioned languages like Dutch, German, Spanish, Afrikaans, Swedish, and of course Norwegian. While watching this YouTube video, I decided to search up what each language sounded like. Now, each language was unique and interesting in their own way, but something about Norwegian just clicked. Like, I instantly fell in love with how the language sounded. In the end, I chose to learn Norwegian not because it was an easy language for me to learn, but because of that instant connection I felt towards it. Over the next year or so, I tried teaching myself Norwegian using language apps like Duolingo, using Norwegian textbooks, and watching Norwegian TV. This approach was very helpful in teaching me Norwegian vocabulary. It just lacked in teaching me how to use the language. I found Norwegian grammar and sentence creation very difficult at this point. So in the spring of 2022, I decided to pursue online Norwegian lessons on a platform called italki. The reason I decided to use italki was because I wanted to find a Norwegian teacher to help me develop a good language learning structure, but to also help me fill in the gaps. Now, my experience with italki and its Norwegian teachers is complex in full transparency. Due to the fact I knew a lot of Norwegian words, a lot of Norwegian teachers assumed I had a higher level in Norwegian than I actually did. A lot of the time, grammar rules were explained to me, but I never actively used Norwegian within my lessons. This led to me understanding the structures and the theory of Norwegian, but leaving me unequipped to actually speak and use the language. Because of these experiences, I winded up changing Norwegian teachers a couple different times, either because I felt like my education wasn't suited for me, or because I felt like I wasn't progressing within Norwegian. I decided to stop taking Norwegian lessons entirely in November of 2022. I felt extremely discouraged. I remember having lessons where I was being taught complex grammar, like how to say small, smaller, smallest, while I still was uncomfortable having basic Norwegian conversations. I could barely order at a restaurant, yet I had Norwegian teachers teaching me grammar that was beyond my level. In January of 2023, I decided to try italki again, but this time around I found a younger woman closer to my age. I thought maybe because she was closer to my age and gender, I could talk to her more comfortably and express when my language needs weren't being met. I saw her weekly from January 2023 till June 2023. I felt comfortable speaking to her, and I felt like my language progressed, but inevitably she decided to pursue her bachelor's degree, and she didn't have enough time to teach anymore. So we stopped having lessons with one another. In June of 2023, I visited Norway for the first time. Being in Norway made me extremely happy because I got to experience the Norwegian culture and to hear the Norwegian language all around. But it also made something very clear. My Norwegian language skills were extremely limited. I remember sitting there being unable to use a language I had spent countless hours and money on. It was heartbreaking because I not only felt like I had wasted so much time and money, but because I felt like it was my fault somehow. Like I should have known that I was terrible at learning a language or that I should have done something differently. When I got home from Norway, I actually decided to step away from my Norwegian learning altogether. In the end, I took about a year and a half off from learning Norwegian, partly because I felt discouraged, and the other part because I started a bachelor's degree program. Then out of nowhere in December of 2024, Norwegian popped back into my mind. I don't know what brought it up, but something inside me knew that that spark was still alive. So from December to February, I studied Norwegian daily to essentially rebuild my Norwegian foundation. I primarily used the Mystery of Nils textbook and the NTNU's online program. In addition, I used passive language immersion to help further my Norwegian skills. I would listen to Norwegian podcasts like Norsk for Beginners, Norsk lærer Kurensa. I would also watch Norwegian YouTube videos to essentially soak my brain in the Norwegian language. I would listen to Norwegian while I was driving, cooking, cleaning, essentially any time that didn't require my full thoughts. It was actually Norwegian with Elias who inspired me to use passive immersion. Previously, I had heard from a few different polyglots you should never listen to content that you don't understand 80% or more of. So it was something I never tried in the past. But Elias highlights the reality that we learn our native language through immersion. So why wouldn't immersion work when it comes to learning a second language? And I don't know, she just made it make sense. So I decided to try it this time around. In addition, I also found an amazing Norwegian teacher on italki. She not only encouraged me to speak in Norwegian, but she took the time to actually understand my individual language needs. On top of all of this, I created Anki flashcards that I reviewed daily. Between the immersion, the speaking practice, and the flashcard reviews, I felt my Norwegian progress more rapidly this time. But unfortunately, last spring, my bachelor's program became more intense and I needed to step back from Norwegian yet again. Since May or June, I haven't been able to actively study. I've been able to review my flashcards a couple times a week and continue passive immersion, yet having to take that step back from Norwegian discouraged me yet again. I used to believe consistency meant daily, and when I couldn't live up to that, I felt like a failure. But I've learned that consistency is different for everyone. For some people, consistency is showing up 15 minutes a day, whereas other people view consistency as showing up 3 times a week but for an hour. And even if your version of consistency doesn't meet the ideal standards that other people have, doesn't mean you can't make real progress. And that's something I had to relearn, especially in regards to language learning. Not all of us can learn our language every single day. Some of us have to learn it a couple times a week. I actually just finished my bachelor's program at the end of this semester, so I am still only completing my flashcards a couple times a week, listening to Norwegian content when I can, and I've been messaging a couple of my Norwegian friends more frequently within the last week or so. But now that I'm done with school, it feels like the right time to focus on learning Norwegian again. This time around, I want to push myself to be consistent, but to also accept that I am not perfect, that I am human. I want to create a routine and a version of consistency that matches me and my individual needs, not just this ideal standard. I created this channel to document and share my realistic journey, imperfections and all, so that others could not only learn from my mistakes, but also see the unaesthetic truth to learning another language. So if you're learning Norwegian or thinking about starting, or just need a reminder that your journey is valid, even if it's different, I'm glad I got to share my journey with you. And if you'd like to see where this journey goes next, you're more than welcome to join me. Ha det bra. Vi snackas.